The bowl sat empty on the marble counter, every grain gone, not a word spoken. Nia Bennett cooked for a living and fixed problems for other people, a black woman alone in soul when her restaurant closed without a week's notice. The only job left paid well and asked no questions. The estate said nothing about who owned it. Kan Tae-hyun, the empty table. A Korean Mafia boss in a tailored dark suit, a black dragon tattoo precise and visible along the left side of his neck. 15 chefs fired in 3 years, not one meal finished. The night the last chef walked out and the kitchen went dark, Nia stayed behind to eat. 1 lamp, 1 bowl, 1 man in the doorway who should have been upstairs. What passed between them when she set that bowl down is not the kind of thing that stays simple. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The last table had already been cleared when the manager called her to the back. Nia stood in the narrow corridor between the walk-in and the dish station, still wearing her apron, still smelling of garlic and sesame. Mr. Yoon's hands were folded on the steel counter. He didn't look up. "We're closing," he said. "End of the week." Nia set her tray down. "The lease?" "Sold, 3 weeks ago." "You're telling me now." He slid an envelope across the counter. Her final pay, in cash, plus 1 extra week. His eyes stayed on the steel. She picked up the envelope and left. Back at her apartment, a single room in Mapogu she shared with another foreign worker who had gone home months ago, Nia sat on the floor with her back against the bed and did the math on her phone. Her visa was tied to the restaurant. Rent was due in 9 days. She had enough for 2 more weeks if she ate nothing but convenience store rice balls, and no one in Seoul to call. She opened every job board she knew. Hotels needed Korean speakers. Catering companies wanted locals. The one reply she received, a small fusion place in Hongdae, vanished before she could respond. They'd hired internally. On the 3rd day, the agency called. A woman named Ms. Shin spoke in measured English, each sentence shaped like a legal document. Live-in position, private residence, kitchen assistant, possibly acting head for an interim period, meals and lodging included. The rate was better than anything she'd found. "Who's the employer?" Nia asked. "A private family, very discreet. The non-disclosure is standard." "And the chef I'd be assisting?" A pause. "There have been some transitions in that role recently." Nia looked at the envelope on her table. Then she said yes. The car that picked her up was black and long, tinted windows turning the Han River into a gray blur. Park Min-jae rode in the front passenger seat without a word. He had a scar along his jaw and a stillness Nia recognized. Not calm, but control. She kept her bag on her lap and watched the city give way to walls and hills until the car turned through a gate and she was somewhere else entirely. The kitchen was larger than any restaurant she'd worked in. Marble counters, 2 center islands, equipment she recognized from culinary magazines. A staff of 4 stood near the secondary island, and the woman named Ji-yeon, who handled service, pulled Nia aside immediately. "The chef arrives at 4. Mr. Kang requires dinner at 8. Ji-yeon's English was careful and exact. "The chef has a menu. You assist." "And Mr. Kang is—" "The owner," Ji-yeon said, in a way that closed the question. The chef arrived at 4:30, with 3 assistants and a printed menu in a plastic sleeve. He turned to his team without a glance at Nia. She worked prep without being asked, stocks, brunoise, mise en place, because there was work and someone needed to do it. At 8:15, Ji-yeon came back through the kitchen door at a speed that was almost running. "He won't come down," she said. The chef looked up from his reduction. "What does he want this time?" "He says the arrangement of the table is wrong." "I changed the table yesterday." The chef set his spoon on the counter. "What does that even mean?" "I don't know. He just refuses. I've changed the menu 4 times. He untied his apron with 2 deliberate movements. Tell him I'm done. He walked out. His assistants followed, carrying their knives. Mia and the prep cook stood in a kitchen full of unplated food. Jiyeon made 2 calls, then returned and told them to refrigerate everything and go home. Staff quarters were in the east wing. They would reassess tomorrow. By 10 o'clock, the kitchen was empty. Nia knew she should sleep. Instead, she stepped inside, turned on a single light, and opened the refrigerator. She was not cooking for anyone. She was just hungry. Short grain rice, rinsed and set. Zucchini and carrots sliced thin. A handful of dried shiitake she reconstituted in cold water. Her grandmother had taught her that, because heat killed the depth. Beef already marinated in soy and sesame. She seared it in 2 batches so it wouldn't steam. She seasoned the vegetables the way she'd learned to season everything, with restraint, then a second pass, then patience. The smell that filled the kitchen was not elaborate. It was just right. She was plating into a single bowl when she heard the footsteps. 1 person, unhurried, from the direction of the main hall. The man who stopped in the doorway was tall in a way that changed the proportions of the room. His jacket was gone, shirt collar open, a dragon tattoo, thin black lines, precisely drawn, coiling along the left side of his neck. He looked at the bowl, then at her. "Who told you to cook?" Nia held the bowl. "No one. This is mine." "Give it to me." "No." Kang Tae-hyun walked to the island, sat on the stool across from her, and placed both hands flat on the marble. He said nothing else. He simply waited. She set the bowl in front of him. He finished every grain of rice without speaking, without looking up, and when he pushed the bowl back across the counter, it was empty, for the first time in longer than anyone in that house could remember. The summons came the next morning, not through the housekeeper, not through Min-jae, through Tae-hyun himself. He was already at the kitchen doorway when Nia arrived to start her shift. No tie, jacket off. He looked like a man who had not slept and did not intend to admit it. "Do it again," he said. Nia set her bag on the counter. She kept her back to him. "I'm a placement coordinator, not a cook." "Do it again." "Why?" He said nothing. That was, she was beginning to understand, its own kind of answer. "I'll pass," she said. "I have chefs to manage." The silence stretched long enough to become a wall between them. Then he said, quietly, as though stating a fact no one had asked for, "I've hired 15 cooks in 3 years." Nia looked at him steadily. "Maybe you're the problem." No one said that to Kang Tae-hyun. She could tell by the way something shifted in his jaw. Not anger, not offense, something more like recognition. He left without another word, and she spent the rest of that day waiting for consequences that never came. The new chef arrived on Thursday. He lasted 6 days. The one after him lasted 9. Nia kept her files updated, rotated her agency contacts, and said nothing. But she noticed. She was precise about noticing things. That Tae-hyun had begun appearing in the kitchen at odd hours. Not to inspect, not to complain. Just there. Standing near the island with his coffee, watching whoever was cooking with an expression she couldn't name. When the next chef quit over what he called an impossible atmosphere, Nia was in the kitchen checking inventory. Tae-hyun came in. She kept counting jars. "He left," he said. "I know." "You'll find another." "I will." She marked a clipboard. "I always do." He looked at her. "You're not bothered." "I'm employed," she said. "That's different from bothered." He stayed. That was the beginning of the pattern. He simply materialized from then on. Some evenings at the far end of the counter, once beside the window, twice pulling a stool to the island while she sorted through whatever she'd decided to make for herself after hours. She had stopped asking him to leave, and something in his stillness felt like attention. She talked because silence made her restless, about the produce market 2 blocks from her old apartment, about how her grandmother had insisted all stews needed a burnt edge to taste right. She talked to the pots mostly, and he listened the way a man listens when he's trying not to be caught doing it. One evening she was reducing a dark stock until it had deepened to the color of wood. He appeared at the doorway. "You'll burn it," he said. "No." "What's it for?" "Nothing," she said. "I reduce it because I want to." Silence. Then, "That's not practical." "You've been eating food made by people who don't love it," she said. "Practical didn't help you." He didn't answer. But he came back the next night, and the one after that. By the 3rd week there was a shape to it. She would be cooking, he would arrive. They would talk about texture, about patient heat versus high heat, about what food does when it's been rushed. He never talked about himself. He talked around himself the way some men talk around a wound, orbiting carefully, testing the edges without touching. One night, unprompted, he said, "My last cook lasted 11 months. "What made him stay?" she asked. He considered this. "He never asked me anything." She smiled at the pot. "That's a strange thing to value." "I didn't say I valued it." It was a Tuesday when it happened. She was making doenjang jjigae, not for any chef, not for the household, for herself, because the weather had turned and her body had asked for it. Taehyun was at the island, forearms bare, watching her section the tofu. "You learned from your grandmother," he said. "Mostly." She set the knife down. She said cooking alone was a waste, that food needed a reason to be made. A pause, long enough that she thought he'd moved past it. "My mother said something like that." She kept her hands still, let the air settle. "She cooked for us when there was nothing else," he said. His voice did not change pitch, that was what marked it, the flatness of something said too many times inside one's own head to have any feeling left on the surface. A single burner, whatever she found, she made it matter. "She sounds like someone who understood what mattered," Nia said. He looked at his hands. "She was. She died when I was 11. She thought, "He has been eating alone since he was 11 years old." She let that go because there was nothing useful to do with it yet. "And after that?" she asked. "After that, food was fuel." She ladled the jjigae into 2 bowls, set one in front of him without ceremony, without asking. He stared at it the way a man stares at something that costs more than he planned to pay. She sat across the island from him and ate. He picked up the spoon. For a while, neither spoke. The kitchen held only the sound of the burner ticking down and the small noises of the meal. She kept her gaze on her own bowl, but she felt it, the shift in the room's weight, when he finished. When she looked up, he was already looking at her, not at the bowl, not at the counter, at her face. And what she saw in his eyes was not the man who sent cooks away without explanation or stood in hallways like a consequence waiting to land. It was something earlier, something formed long before the tattoo, before the suits, before any of it. He noticed her noticing. He stood, pushed the stool back, walked out without a word, faster than the moment required. She stared at the 2 empty bowls and realized she had just become dangerous to him. The invitation arrived 3 days before the dinner. Heavy cream paper, the Kang crest embossed in gold. Nia found it propped against the ceramic jar on the kitchen counter. No name on the envelope, just a time and a dress code. She set it back where it had been. She understood immediately. This was not an oversight. Soo-jin had spent the week on the phone. Nia caught fragments through walls, names she recognized from financial news, cousins flying in from Seoul with luggage packed for something longer than a weekend. By Friday evening, the dining room held 22 people. A Michelin-starred chef named Kwan arrived with a team of 4, who claimed the kitchen entirely and asked Nia, politely but without ambiguity, to leave. She waited in the hallway. The sounds of the dinner reached her through the wall: crystal, low laughter, the soft percussion of a serving lid lifted and set aside. She stood with her arms at her sides and listened to the sounds of a life she cooked for but could not sit down inside. Taehyun sat at the head of the table. The first course came: seared scallops on cauliflower puree, something translucent on top that caught the candlelight. He tasted it, set the fork down. The second course followed, a short rib braised long enough to forget it had ever been raw. 2 bites. Then the utensils crossed on the plate, a signal Chef Kwan had not prepared for. The room carried on as if it hadn't happened. That was the protocol here. Sujin lifted her glass and smiled at no one in particular. At least tonight our guests will eat something prepared by someone who belongs in a professional kitchen. She let the sentence land. 22 people found somewhere else to look. Someone reached for their wine. Taehyun stood, not angry, not fast. He pushed the chair back the way a man does when he has already decided, and all that remains is sequence. He walked through the corridor and pushed open the kitchen door. Nia was still there, standing near the window with a glass of water she hadn't touched. "Come," he said. She looked at him. "The chef is finished." He held the door. She walked through it. The dining room went quiet the moment she entered. 22 people, half of them with money older than the building they sat in. Sujin's expression didn't change, which was its own kind of information. Taehyun spoke to Nia directly, as if the table didn't exist. "Make something." She didn't ask what. She went back past the 4-person brigade, which parted without comment, pulled a pan, and made what she knew: rice, egg, sesame, scallion. The geometry of a dish requiring nothing but attention. Quick enough, honest enough. She moved through it the way she moved through everything she had learned to trust. She carried it out herself, set it in front of him. He ate, every grain. The room watched the way people watch something they cannot categorize. Sujin's pearls caught the light with each slow, controlled breath. When the bowl was empty, Sujin set down her glass. "You intend to put a servant in charge of this house?" The word landed exactly where she had aimed it. Nia felt it low in her sternum. Taehyun set the bowl down. "She doesn't work for this house anymore. She works for me, and only for as long as she chooses." Real silence, the kind with edges. Nia kept her face still, but her hands, resting against her apron, they had learned to be quiet too. After the guests left, she stood alone in the kitchen. The chef's team had packed their equipment in black cases and gone out the service entrance without a word. The roses in the dining room were already softening at the edges. She ran hot water over her hands and stayed there longer than the task required. She had crossed something without noticing the crossing. Not drama, arithmetic. She had rearranged herself around a man whose world had walls she couldn't see from the inside. She had told herself it was professional. She had told herself she was temporary and adaptable and fine. The accumulation of those small corrections had become its own kind of debt, and she had been paying it for weeks without naming it. She dried her hands, pulled an index card from the drawer. She wrote the recipe in full, every measurement, every step, the exact order of additions. At the bottom of the card, one sentence: "Now you don't need me to make it anymore." She left it on the counter, weighted by the ceramic jar. Packing took less time than expected. A coat, 2 changes of clothes, the knife she had brought from home. Outside, the gate opened and closed. A light on the perimeter went dark. She did not leave through the main entrance. The side door closed behind her with a sound that required no ceremony and received none. He came back past midnight. The kitchen light was off. He turned it on and stood in the doorway for a moment, reading nothing, because there was nothing left to read except the index card on the counter and the absence of everything that had made the room what it was. He picked it up, read it once, set it back down. The mansion had always been large. 14 rooms he rarely entered, corridors that swallowed sound, windows facing a garden no one used. But size is not felt until it is measured against something warm. He walked to the stove, touched the cold iron of the clean pan on its hook. The overhead light buzzed once, very quietly, and the house settled around him. A pipe somewhere, a window catch moving slightly in the wind, the particular quality of silence that only arrives when someone who filled a space has taken that filling with them. He did not reach for his phone. There was no call that would fix the specific thing that was wrong. The kitchen smelled of smoke before he reached the stove. He had pulled the recipe from the counter where she'd left it, her handwriting neat and unhurried across the margin of a torn notepad page. He had read it 3 times. He followed it precisely. The meat burned anyway. He turned off the burner, stood back, looked at the pan with the same flat attention he gave quarterly reports. Then he rinsed it, dried it, and started again. The second attempt was worse. The seasoning was off. He had measured it, but something in the proportion was wrong, something that lived in the space between reading a recipe and understanding it. He set the spoon down. The rice was gummy. The sauce had separated into 2 distinct layers. 10 minutes passed. He began again. This was not how he solved problems. He called people. He assigned tasks. He waited for results to arrive with the edges already clean. He had never stood in this kitchen and failed at something 3 consecutive times in the same evening. He scraped the second pan into the trash and turned the heat down. He tried to remember how she had moved through the space, where she had paused, what she reached for without looking, the way her hands never hesitated over the wrong jar. He had watched her without understanding what he was watching. That was the whole problem. He was still at the stove when Park Min-jae appeared in the doorway. Min-jae read the room the way he read security situations, completely, immediately, without signaling that he'd read it. 2 discarded pans near the sink, the notepad on the counter, spice jars in the wrong order. He found the wall near the refrigerator and leaned against it. Several minutes passed. The third attempt was also terrible. "You have a chef on call," Min-jae said. "I know." "He could be here in 20 minutes." "I know." Silence. "She cooked for you once," Min-jae said. "I know." "You don't mean the food." Taehyun set down the ladle. "No." His shoulders stayed still. Something behind his sternum shifted, a recognition arriving without ceremony, the way a lock opens when the right key finally turns. Not the food. It had never been the food. 15 chefs had come and gone because none of them had made him feel that someone had wanted him at the table. He had spent years calling it a preference, a standard. He had let the table stay empty rather than admit what the empty table actually meant. Nia had walked into his kitchen and looked at him like he was a person who could be understood. Something in the room had changed that day. He hadn't named it. He hadn't needed to until now. He picked up the ladle again. "Go home, Min-jae." At the doorway, Min-jae paused. "The pot with the lid, the blue one." He didn't look back. "That one holds heat better." He carried the pot himself. No driver waited at the curb. He told the detail to stand down and walked the 6 blocks alone in the dark overcoat, pot in both hands, the night air moving through the gap at his collar. He hadn't rehearsed anything. He wouldn't know what to say until he was already saying it. She opened the door and her eyes went immediately to the pot. Her expression shifted. Not surprise, something slower, requiring more careful interpretation. He held it slightly toward her. "I used the blue one." She reached for the lid, looked inside for a long moment. Then she looked at him. Then she looked inside again. She laughed. It started small, a breath through the nose, then her hand came up to cover her mouth, but the laugh was already past the point of covering. She leaned against the door frame. It was a real one, the kind that came without consultation. Something happened in his face, a slight softening at the jaw, then a low sound from his chest, not quite laughter but in its neighborhood. His shoulders dropped. It was enough. She stepped back from the door. He came in. "It smells like smoke," she said. The first 2 attempts. She looked at the pot. The third attempt was right there under the lid, speaking for itself. The pot went on her counter. She didn't offer him anything, and he didn't ask. He stood near the window. She stood near the island. The space between them was smaller than it had been in weeks. He looked at the window first, then at the floor, then at her. "I thought it was the food," he said. She waited. "For years, I thought I was searching for a taste I remembered." He paused. "I was wrong." She stayed quiet. "I wasn't looking for a meal." His voice stayed level. "I was looking for the feeling of being wanted." He stopped. "Someone who wanted me at the table." City light cut a thin line through the window. Her curls caught the edge of it. "And then you came into my kitchen." She held his gaze for a moment. "I'm not coming back as your chef." "I know." "You cook this yourself?" "Badly." "Yes." Something shifted behind her eyes. "Badly." She reached into the cabinet, 2 plates. She set them on the island side by side. She looked at him once, directly, and he moved to the chair she hadn't pulled out for him. The kitchen was warm. The pot between them was terrible. Neither mentioned it. The chair across from his, no longer empty. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever kept someone at a distance because letting them in felt more dangerous than being alone? Have you ever shared a meal that meant something neither of you put into words? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about loneliness, healing, and love found in unexpected places, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.